Ah, woo.
Hiya.
Hello, Bernard.
Welcome, everyone. So, as you can maybe able to see today, this month's webinar is a little bit different to usual because we have a special guest. But before I introduce them, I am going to welcome everyone to Making Business Finance Sexy. And I'm going to take a drink because I forgot to earlier. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm going to introduce everyone today, but before we do that, I just want to quickly say we are producing this live stream on the land of the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Alliance. So sovereignty was never ceded. We need a treaty now. Let's start the show. And by starting the show, I'm going to introduce everyone one by one, and we'll start off with Roy. For those who may not know who you are, Roy, I doubt it if they're here, but if they have stumbled along, who are you, Roy?
Hi. Yeah, my name's Roy. I have two businesses in Geelong, Business Management Geelong, and what we're featuring today, Humanising Money Matters. The goal of what I'm trying to achieve and the service I'm looking to provide is for the entrepreneur who is struggling with compliance, bookkeeping, business management, may have a fantastic creative idea, business structure, but just don't know how to put it all together, and trying to give advice and a helping hand to get that set up so that productivity and, more importantly, getting traction, market penetration, so that there's a business and a lifestyle to be created. So it's a business mentoring type style, but with a lot of individual aspects around what it needs to be a successful business owner.
Awesome to hear. And with our special guest, Bernard Kelly. Bernard, would you be able to tell the nice folks in online land, who are you?
Well, actually, of course, I'm just a modern elder. That's someone who's past the statutory age when you leave the paid workforce. So I'm still an entrepreneur. I'm bubbling along. Actually, I've got an online school, which is called Retirement Hobbies with Bernard Kelly. And that's on Facebook, of course. No, sorry, YouTube. And then to round out my week, I spend a lot of time with a charity here in Geelong, and I'm the fundraising executive for that charity. And so I specialise in helping them with tax deductible donations via emails. And that's my little story.
Oh, thank you for that, Bernard. And in relation, everyone, hi, I'm Zoe Wood, your video confidence coach, giving you the confidence to build your personal brand via video. I do video, webinar, social media, all the things that are done. So let's move on to what you're here for, the meat of today's session. Make sure we've got the right banner, and I'm going to make sure that I take off our names because we all know who we are now because we've introduced each other. So what I wanted to get you guys rolling with today, I am here in the background. I'm here to mediate. I'm not going to be throwing myself too far into the conversation today, but you guys, both of you, are going to be discussing a lot of aspects about running small businesses, and when it comes to loans and when it comes to business loans and personal loans, I imagine. Am I right? Because I did write the bio and I did do all the backup for this information. I want to make sure that I got that right.
Yeah, because often, Zoe, there'll be a different level of finance that you're able to achieve, and sometimes for a smaller concern, it may be a 10 or 15 grand personal loan to where a business may be in its first or second year and might be looking for $50,000 or $60,000 as a business loan. So it's really understanding, and because the other thing that Bernard has, of course, is a number of years in his working life as an ANZ banker. So it's interesting to get his perspective on how the system looks today versus what it looked like 50 years ago, and what advice that he can advise for people building around their business ideas. And of course, I think the critical aspect of before any sort of financing, I think, is having a viable business. So there's a combination. Bernard's brought a number of dot point forms to us today that will be in the discussion in and around finding business finance as well. So probably what I'd like to start with, Bernard, is going back, to your early days when you were starting out. You've given us some wonderful notes.
So about 5 years ago, right? Like 5, 6 years ago? Yeah, 5, 6 ago.
your lovely wife. She had an experience which I think might even be something that's still a relevant experience today.
Well, I think at the outset, Roy, I would always advise people do not borrow, because the problem with when you borrow money, you've got to pay it back. And particularly in the early days, you aren't making any profits. It might take 3 or 4 years before you can really start to declare what the tax man would say is a taxable income. And so you need equity to get going. But so the best thing to do is just to get out there and make sales.
Yeah.
And if you can prove that you can make sales, well, then you can move on and create a business. But so really, you need a lot of energy, and you need insights, and you need a product that you'll find willing buyers out there in the marketplace. But really, it's I would say about loans, the topic of tonight's discussion. I'd say don't borrow in the early days.
Yeah, it's the serviceability, I think, for what banks are looking at particularly now, I think are really, really, really challenging. And you're right, there should be a level of self-funding. But again, that's probably sort of like, to me, the balancing of the dynamics of what anyone has to face today is the cost of living, making enough to get by. Where do you get to at a certain point when you can expand, and how you go about that? And I think developing sales and a marketing plan is probably a key element before anything. My experiences have been generally in back office and operations in terms of establishing or helping businesses once they've got their footing. And it's really important to understand what the dynamics of starting from scratch and getting to where you can, as you say, Bernard, make a viable income and that may allow you then to take some finance out to expand or buy equipment that you need to do it better and efficiently and all those sorts of things. But yes, I totally agree. The first 2 or 3 years until you've actually got a cash flow you can demonstrate to the bank that you're able to service any sort of loan situation is critical to the outcome.
Yes, and in some regards, it's easier to borrow today. Like you can go down to the NAB, and I think you can get a line of credit there, really no questions asked, for about $90,000 to a maximum of $90,000. Now that's something that's only a really recent innovation, but of course, once again, that is borrowing, and that's where I say, hey, there's risks when you borrow, particularly when you're a startup entrepreneur in the early years.
Yeah, like in your experience because you've also been in real estate as well, so that's, I think, gives you a window to the personal or the home life of people and how it goes. And in that, probably for me is really quite an interesting point to start, because that area of getting finance, getting into a home, also depends on what sort of income you've got. So in your days of running a real estate agent, what was the impact of finance and the ability for people to get finance or not get finance for people to be able to buy a home in your time?
Right. Well, it's typically it's always, you have to, if you're a first home buyer, you have to actually get the equity, the deposit, so you can move ahead. And that's often a struggle, and particularly here in Australia today, it's getting more and more difficult, because the price of the real estate is going up at an exponential rate, far higher, far quicker than wages are going up. So you may have to tap, if you're starting out, you may have to, as I say, approach the bank of mum and dad if you are to start out. And that's something that, as a recent phenomenon, but previously, somehow or other, we all were able to save enough money for a deposit. And after that, and of course, in my personal business experience as a real estate agent, I specialised in helping people with investment properties. So once you have your first one, you're then able to move into get another one. Yeah.
So what you would say is the real biggest shift would be that ease of saving for that deposit maybe 20, 30 years ago versus what it is now. See, often yes. I get the argument, I shouldn't say the argument, but the discussion around, the recession we had to have, interest rates at 17, 18%, but we were borrowing far less, perhaps 10, 20%. Like, for example, I think I had a loan of $40,000 at 17%, whereas, now if someone's got an average loan of 600,000 at 17%, it would absolutely kill you. You just wouldn't be in the market. You wouldn't be able to do it. So I think, but to me, what you mentioned is the scariest thing for, young people like Zoe and her partner Zach, is how do you get around to getting into the market at a level that you can survive? Because if you buy the property and you're on bread and water, gosh, is that really the outcome you want?
Now, I think the solution is you really have to buy an investment property, not where you want to live, but where you can see it as a business so it'll grow. So you go out to a little village in the not too far away into the countryside, buy a property, wait 3 or 4 or 5 years till it goes up and gives you enough equity there. So, excuse me, so you can go back and buy the house you want to live in your own metropolitan area.
Yeah, so you're saying the using the negative gearing, what they call negative gearing aspects, to kickstart your equity growth, Bernard.
Well, yes, use those techniques. Of course, negative gearing doesn't exist anymore because you can actually, with interest rates so low, there's no big differential.
Right. So what you're saying then is just an opportunity to buy into the market at a reasonable level that's affordable.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And you can afford one in a village, in a village not too far away from where you live.
Yeah. So, like, for example, here in Geelong, if there's something in a 50 to 60 kilometre radius, that's a town of 600 to 1,000. I don't know any off the top of my head, but maybe perhaps not Geelong, because I think real estate anywhere near Geelong is absolutely rocketing at the moment. But I understand the process. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So it's about affordability to get you a foot into the market that can give you some equity to grow and get used to having that loan, so that when you go to buy your forever home, that you've got some concept about what it needs to manage a mortgage.
Yeah, that's all you need. See, when you want to, but going back to being a young entrepreneur who's starting out, they aren't really in a position to have any money at all to save for a deposit. So I think they're limited just to working on cash flow, and until suddenly they get a major contract, and that will allow them to go to a bank and say, hey, I have now got a business going and I want a home loan as well.
Yeah. No, I think and also too, Bernard, how do you see, sort of post the worst? Well, can't really say whether it's the worst or not, of our being out now 2 years down the track of the pandemic, and seeing where we're sitting now. What's your view on business, the world, and how all this could play out in terms of being able to meet those goals that you want, even if starting with an investment property, then buying your own home and running a business? There's so many variables, as the hospitality, and sadly the hospitality and the tourism businesses in particular have really been decimated with lack of staff, lack of opportunity, business shutdowns. I just feel, even though we have a lull, I still don't feel a lot's changed from the last 2 years. And it's just a gut feel. I still feel at any point in time the whole thing could be apocalyptic again. And I'm not really sure we want to have that. But, yeah, I'm just interested from an elder statesman point of view, what would your advice be about what we're talking about, taking COVID risk into account?
Well, it's always been difficult to start a business, and a young entrepreneur has always had those difficulties. This is why I say basically just go out and make a sale.
Yeah.
And if you can make a sale, you can make a second sale, and
Yep.
you can move on from there. The problem, actually, I think that many startup entrepreneurs face is that they have the mindset where they're locked in to what's happened in the past, and so they aren't familiar with reaching out into uncharted territory. Perhaps they've got a new product. It could be a a biscuit for dogs, but how do you get one of those up and running? But
Yep.
there's always been a problem to get started. But my view is if you can focus on the sales, get a sale underway, get another sale underway, and gradually over time you succeed. But it might take some years.
Yeah, no, you're right. I have a young entrepreneur, a young lady by the name of Angela Sumner, and hopefully she won't mind me using her as an example. But so I've been looking after her for about 2 years now, and she has developed started out with a what I would call a niche little cottage industry around slices, and by God, she makes a good job of making a slice. And she's done exactly what you've done, Bernard. She's developed a product, developed initially through the general public through the first lot of COVID, and now she's moving on to a distribution chain through cafes, and the business is really stepping up in a very, very planned and executed way, and she's been able to buy equipment to help that business grow, and so forth. But she has got the support of a husband working full time, so there's another element to that she's not trying to establishing everything on her own. But you're absolutely right. Her focus was to build a fantastic product. Now she's growing it and getting into different markets, and it really is maybe as simple as what you said, Bernard. Get a sale, make a second sale, make a third sale, inside a couple of years, she's built it into a really growable and viable, successful business.
And that's a very good
now,
point.
when you focus on that selling, when you focus on the selling, you don't really understand. You have to have all the administration there. And I often think that if the doctor, when you go and see a doctor, if you're sick, the doctor first of all says, let's have a look at your heart, and I'll take your blood pressure and all the rest. I'll look in your eyes. And so when you go to get a bank loan, that any entrepreneur starting out, when they go to get a bank loan, the bank will want to see the balance sheet and the profit or loss for the last couple of years per month, each month. So my view is, I run into small startup new entrepreneurs, I say, make sure you get yourself going with a profit and loss statement monthly and a balance sheet monthly, and that then establishes their understanding that one day a bank is going to ask for that straight out of the box. So you go to see the bank, they'll say, hey, let's have a look at your last month's profit and loss and last month's balance sheet. Now, when an entrepreneur starts out, they have no idea that request will be coming in due course from the bank. So I say you have to get that discipline right in place right from day one.
Yeah, totally agree. And luckily with with Angela and the support of her husband, we've been able to achieve that, because he's in a very cost-driven environment with the management role that he's got. So he was very focused on making sure the I's were dotted, the T's were crossed in terms of those parameters. And absolutely spot on, Bernard. They wanted monthly reporting so they could see exactly what the business was doing. And what's really fascinating now is seeing sort of year-on-year growth, so you can clearly demonstrate where the business is going, the success it's having. So absolutely right. And this, Angela, is a really good example of having that discipline right from day one, So as you say, it's not just about having a creative idea and making a sale. If you're making $100 in sales, but it's costing you $150 to get that $100 sale, well, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Whereas if you've got your margins right, your costs right, and your profitability, then by that discipline, looking at your profit and loss and balance sheet, you can see where your business is going. Did you want to say something before, Zoe? Yeah.
As you guys were mentioning, as you were discussing, it brought up an idea that I may have mentioned on the webinar before, but Bernard was very heavily alluding to it. When starting a business, starting with your minimum viable product or your MVP, it's a very common business terminology that I was forced upon me when I learned about business. But essentially, it's what you can do with the minimal amount of effort, resources, and time to be able to get the product, service, or what have you out there. There is a lot of hustle culture out there, and I'm sure that you, Bernard and Roy, have definitely come across that in social media or out there in when it comes to small businesses. A lot of hustle, like you got to keep going, you got to keep going, you got to keep doing, with no understanding or no benefit of, oh yes, you can keep going and you can keep doing, in other words, but if you don't have your profit and loss statements and if you don't have your balance sheets at the end of the month, the bank's not going to give you more money. Like you can work as hard as you can with the resources and time that you have available. But if you want to grow, you are going to need that input of a loan of some kind, either be it a loan of money or a loan of time or a loan of resources, whatever access that you have available. What I would like to know from both of you is over the time, because even though you are a little bit older than me, just a smidge older than me, you've also been in business a smidge longer than me, just a smidge. What I would like to know is what you guys have seen in regards to changes, because I remember a couple of webinars ago, Roy, you were mentioning about the change of GST was a very major swing when it came to bookkeeping, but also I imagine it impacted business in Australia as a whole. And I've always known about GST because I grew up with it. I didn't have to worry about thinking about it too much to the point that it affected me. So is there any other major changes that Bernard or Roy can let us know about? What major changes do you think have influenced us getting to where we are now when it comes to small business?
Oh, look, from my perspective, it's the growth in information the tax office wants. This is what it's called, but I won't. I'll explain it in. I hope by what I understand. There's a thing now where every pay run, like say for example, if you've got you're a firm and you've got 5 employees, each pay, there's a thing called Simple Touch Payroll. It's a button you push and that information gets filed straight to the ATO. Now they're taking that to the next level, or calling it STP Phase 2, where that information will also be reported to child support, family services, and so on. So that craving of instantaneous information that flows through off your everyday paycheck, and particularly, I think we're all aware that there's most people I think do the right thing around child support, but there's a lot of people that don't do the right thing. And part of this is ensuring fairness in the system. But to me, it's a compliance on small business that we don't need. It's another headache that's once we got over GST, there was a whole range of information being reported on that eventually got whittled down to about 20% of what it started out as, which was common sense. Because a lot of the information on the quarterly basis ends up being reported in your tax return at the end of the financial year. But for me, probably what's happening now is the strive the ATO is making to gather as much information from businesses and employees that I've never seen before in 20 years.
The government doing something annoying? Never! What are you talking about? They always have their best thoughts in heart. Ugh.
Yeah, but it's a cost to software companies to develop. It's a cost for businesses to be compliant to. But I guess the sheer volume of information and data that has to go through Services Australia, I think it's called now. I don't know whether that's Centrelink or whatever. But to me, it's the information flow. And then, to be totally cynical, there's a bit of an element of Big Brother about it as well. But in the same breath, if you do the right thing, you're not going to have a problem. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'd agree. In business, I think you really have to strive to be honest at all times, because otherwise someone's going to trip you up. But going back to, I think the audience here, young startup entrepreneurs, if you really haven't got yourself totally into your products stream, I would think go back and find out, or just consider, where are the growth sectors in the economy, and that's where, on an escalator, if you can stand on the escalator that's going up, you're going to be so much better off. It's so much easier to make sales. And it could be the building industry, or it could be, wherever people are dying.
I think
coffins or something.
What you were saying before, Bernard, is identifying a situation, and not sure it was yourself, Zoe, or Bernard. And a lot of I've seen shows where literally husband and wife, or brothers and sisters starting a recipe for pet food. It's a massive market. It's, I don't know, hundreds of millions, $1 billion. The pet market is amazing, and doing something different. There's no point or very little sense in saying that you can go into a mature market and say that you're going to be a kingpin in an already crowded and mature market, because there's so, to create an opportunity for yourself is so hard. But as you rightly said there, Bernard, if you're able to identify a particular skill set, and maybe we'll take Zoe's area of social media as an example, where you can provide an information flow on a platform that makes this social media life functional and straightforward, there's got to be an opportunity to do it better and slicker than anyone else. And that's the key element. If you're not identifying where your opportunity lies, you're going to be in trouble, I think.
Yeah, well, of course, it's still not easy, because my little business, my retirement hobbies with Bernard Kelly, which I teach retirees and senior executives particularly, how to think about having a profitable hobby in their retirement. Now, the great problem, that's a great idea, and I am having some success, but of course it is difficult to find that target audience. Who are these imminent retirees, people who are just about to retire? How do you find them? So while it's a brilliant idea, and I'm sure I'm going to make mega bucks out of it one day, it is difficult to find a new market and then find the customers. You know what they need, what you've got, but actually getting the connection with them, is difficult. So this has always been difficult.
Yeah, I'd actually like to add to that, Bernard, because that's literally been my experience with my bookkeeping and accounting so far in Geelong. I've been fortunate. The half dozen contacts that I've got have all been face to face, and I think in any established, mature market is getting people to take notice of you, because there's a complacency, for want of a better word. If mum and dad have used this tax agent / bookkeeper / accountant, well, they must be okay, and that's okay to a point. But for me, it's bang for buck and serviceability and the outcome. Some of the prices I've heard bookkeepers in particular charging around $100 an hour, and I go, I'm not sure how businesses can afford that. But they must have a level of trust in the information and the output. And I also hope they don't correlate cost with benefit, because there's certainly a lot of experience, like yourself, Bernard, with your banking, your real estate, and your zest for living that you've got now. If you get $100 an hour, you beauty. But there's value in what the outcome gives you that people don't seem to. At the moment, I found that very hard to get that opportunity to find the people to get involved with, and also the right people that are a fit for you, and you're a fit for their business as well.
Well, I think one of the problems we have when you start up, young people start out, they go to see an accountant. Or no, let me give you an example. If you go to see a lawyer, now over the centuries, lawyers have worked out the minimum fees they can charge to have a profitable practice, and of course that is much higher than what a startup young entrepreneur can afford. But it's built in. When you go to see a lawyer, the fees they charge are built in to their centuries of experience of knowing how much they'll have to charge to have a viable business practice in their own name. So, and the same with accountants. Accountants can be more flexible, but nevertheless, I think it's difficult if you don't have to use an accountant. My situation is I always did as much as I could myself, and then, but I did actually, and then once a year, of course, you do all the what you have to do to comply. But I might just say, and when I started out, one of the things I found was that you can actually pay your BAS every month, and that really, when you start out, because you're making losses in your early first few months, might be 12 months, you actually can get money back, and that helps your cash flow. And a lot of people, when they start out, don't know that because they don't have the experience of having relationship with other entrepreneur startups.
And I'll take that one step further, and that's probably I've learned with my association with you, Zoe, is a lot of the young people, as soon as you mention GST BAS, there's a meltdown. And right, there's the shift that I try and educate people on now. And Bernard, again, your strategy is recommended if you've got the ability. If you try and do it yourself and you haven't got the ability, there's a whole new mess that you can create for yourself. But if you've got that right-brained, logical understanding of how expenses and things should work, then you've got the right strategy, because the cloud-based software at the moment gives the entrepreneur business owner the ability to run their business and just have the tax agent in the background with direction and support at different points of time. But again, those softwares are a little bit something that you'd still need a little bit of knowledge on how to drive. And that's my concern. With a colleague of Zoe's, we spoke to in the start of the market planning for humanising money managers, was the predominant thing. I'm just doing it on a spreadsheet, or I'm just doing it on keeping notes, or I'm just doing whatever just to do the minimal to have an idea of what I'm doing. But you're absolutely right. If you're in a position where you're able to have someone where their GST credits could come back to them, even though they're not having to theoretically, they're voluntary registered rather than compulsory registered. Yes, there's a definite benefit of getting the GST credits back with a minimum of fuss if you've got the right software set up.
Well,
of course, we're talking about a mismatch of cultures, because the reason is that the entrepreneur wants to get out there and do things, excitement. And of course, what we're now talking about is the other side of the brain, where we have to find some area there where the entrepreneur will do all the bookwork himself. And I think now that I'm into my situation now, I'd always go and find somebody like yourself, Roy, and tell if I was running into a young entrepreneur starting up, I'll say, go and talk to Roy Emmett, because he actually can do all that background, allows you to get out and have all the fun.
Yeah, exactly right, Bernard. And that's part of the conversation when Zoe was ready to step up, when we unwound a lot of the misinformation and structure within her software. That anyway, that's a story for another time. But the elements of spending, I don't think it was that long a time. Really, Zoe, from memory, was probably over a period of 6 months tops, where you were very open and honest and say, Roy, look, I'm just not getting this. I don't understand why it's not working. I've gone through X, Y, Z, and this is the result I've got. So Zoe gave me a fair bit of scope to say, okay, just let me look at your file and let me identify what's wrong, and then I'll report back to you about what we need to do. And part of that process was, I think, Zoe, and correct me if I'm wrong, was just building initially the trust to understand that the information after a number of bad experiences was actually making sense, and you were absorbing it and saying, yep, that sounds right. That sounds what I can get my head around. And then we got to a choice of saying, okay, now it's finished. It's up to date. You have the capacity, the way it's structured, to do this yourself, or I can continue for a fee. And because Zoe had a far better understanding, I think it took you about 1.5 seconds. That's yours, Roy. You just do it. Which is a great relationship to have, because if you've got a budding entrepreneur, there's a point where information about what you need to do is critical for the relationship. But if that inquiry goes to a point, well, how does accounting work? I did have one lead that went down that path, and I just killed it, because she was almost wanting me to be an accounting teacher to her. She wanted to understand to the nth degree what I was doing, and I've gone, not going to work, and so forth. So it's really important, just that relationship and that balance of information to give the startup entrepreneur an opportunity to make that decision as what's best for their business.
Because the recommendation I have for most people that I come in contact with, be them small business owners or not, having someone, so say, for example, coming across someone like yourself, Roy, previous to the people that didn't exactly work out, but to be able to have that weight, that pain, being able to just hand it over to you. You looked at the mess and went, cool, done, picked it all out. Here's a nice bow, present it to you. Yeah, like it was one of those situations where I had heard the rumors or light sprinklings out there in the small business community that one of your first investments should be a bookkeeper or should be an accountant, and I never really herald that advice at all, because I thought, I'm doing all right. I look at my books once every 3 months. I'm fine. I know what I'm doing. I can pull this off. And then Roy comes along and is just like, what's this? What's this? And it's like, I clearly don't know what I'm doing.
It's an education process, Zoe. And as Bernard said, right from the word go, the really critical part is trying to educate the young, or even someone in their 40s. There's a lot of executives now that will take a package in their late 30s or their 40s and run off and want to try and start a business. And some of them just go, holy shit, this is way harder than whatever I thought it was going to be. Because there's a certain element, an expectation that you can get things done. I'm sorry. I might just get you to turn me off while I go and get a glass of water, Zoe, because my throat's, I'll be back. Just hold that thought. All
right. Well, me and Bernard will have a lovely time without you then, Roy.
Yeah, because I think actually when Roy's point there, someone, a mid-tier executive, a woman or a man, decides to take a package and set themselves up, it really is it's really a recipe for disaster unless they have some background, like they're running a profitable hobby already. Because if they just go in cold, it's like you going to sit down, play poker, and you really know nothing about how to play poker, and of course you'll be fleeced all the time by the people you're dealing with, you're playing poker against. So really it's I always doubt all these entrepreneurial shows that you see about how you can actually make some money. Though I must say, when you watch a thing like Shark Tank, that does suggest that there's a lot of hard graft involved before you get to the situation where you can appear on Shark Tank and say, hey, I need some more money to grow even further. But this is what I've done.
I agree, Bernard. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where you don't want to not encourage people to keep going. You can be fortunate enough to, there's some IT computer geeks at 20 that are multi-millionaires because they've just lucked into, well, I'm not sure what's the right word, but have found a niche that no one else is doing, and they do it really well. And then the big boys come in and tap them on the shoulder and say, here's a check for $20 million. Thank you very much. That is the gem, the rare diamond in the rough. Most of us, as say, like Zoe, you've been in business since you were 14. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
You've got some drag races coming out there, you two.
Not
there's someone down my street here.
Of course.
Yeah, no,
that's right. There's very few people like Canva who can become an overnight success, and that really often it's an overnight success after 15 years. But it's a slow build up, and then you get yourself in the front page of the Geelong Advertiser. But it takes a while. Yeah.
So, Bernard, again, with your knowledge and expertise over a long period of time, for example, if what you said about, creating the sales, getting some momentum, and establishing that you've got something that is viable. You've been in business for 2 or 3 years. Say you've built up a turnover of $60,000-$70,000, which less costs, you might have a profit of about $40,000. Where would you invest that profit? What would you do as an elder statesman, having seen the banking, real estate from an investing point of view, and just general living, because at the end of the day, the processes have to be whatever equity you want to build, you've still got cost of living. And we don't have to say a lot to just to look at the petrol bowser and say, yep, that hurts, So what would your advice be to someone in that established zone that's getting traction and is building their business? What would be the advice to you? Do you get extra people, or do you invest in IT, or do you? I guess it depends what sort of business you're going after. To a degree, I guess, doesn't it?
I think really I would go after 3 years, and you're not making mega millions already. I would say you should be thinking about partnerships somehow, or that's where you can actually find somebody who's on your same wavelength. And they appreciate what you've got, and you appreciate what they've got. And without actually creating a formal relationship, I think you should actually start to develop partnerships and work in close consort with parties that you can work with. But that's a theoretical approach. But it really doesn't work out well. To actually find that partnership, you really have to get out and do networking continually. And
again, in your experience, Bernard, if it comes to a crossroads, say we're 5 years plus into it, in that 5 to 10 year zone, and things have plateaued, and the opportunities seem to be drying up, do you say to someone, look, just go and get a job, or do you try and because sometimes it's not that easy. If you're in business at 25 and suddenly you're 35, and if you haven't invested in your skills, even, like myself, I got retrenched at 38 and had to go back to college because I had no viable skills that would give me a realistic opportunity of being employed. And I just got lucky because the GST got up. My brother needed a hand in his accounting practice, and luckily I was okay with numbers, and as they say, the rest was history. I feel very humble and blessed that the breaks came my way at the times I needed them. We may have an advantage at the moment because unemployment's low, good workers are scarce, but sometimes people make their businesses their whole identity and their whole life. So I don't know how you manage that if it's not working out.
Well, that's right. When it starts to crumble, and it doesn't go down overnight, but basically you realise you're not really going to make big money in the near future. So I've had 1 or 2 consultancies over the years with people just like that, and in each case, well, my solution was, well, my suggestions to them, and we worked through this for a while, I'd say go back to when you were 5 years old, and what would you dream about when you were 5 years old? What were you going to become when you grew up? And then I'd say, we have the conversation, what about when you're 10 years old? And then when you were 15? And by actually you write all these things down in the scrapbook and the paper on paper, you can then actually talk to these people who businesses are stabilizing or crumbling or not doing too well. And you say, well, that might be an interest to you. Why don't you explore an opportunity in that area? And when they actually look at it and say, hey, yes, when I was 15, I did think I was going to become a plumber or a truck driver. I say, well, look, let's explore that. Where, from what you know, where if you had a product that would sell into that people driving trucks or servicing trucks, what would you do? And I think that might be a way to, in the ideal world, if you've got time, if they've got time to rephrase their lifestyle and their business, I'd say that might be a possible way to go.
Yeah, I've helped a number of businesses through that phase, and it's really really difficult to sort of work through, because you're starting, particularly if someone starts to go down the rabbit hole of depression and anxiety, you kind of start to get a little bit out of your field. And I think there's two in particular businesses what I probably wasn't strong enough to promote early enough to pull the pin, and the hole just got bigger. Both of them end up obviously going bankrupt, and completely had to rejig their lives. And if it's your life's passion and mission and you've failed at it, I think that's a really challenging situation. And I'd probably like you to step in at this point, Zoe, and say, in terms of your peer group or contacts you have you had any experience where young people have tried and failed, and how they've coped, or have you been fortunate enough that the people you're surrounded with, like yourself, have ground out, had a couple of years of getting by, and now starting to escalate and improve what the business can do?
There's been I've come across many people in those situations. As you mentioned before, Bernard, about people attaching, or maybe it was you, Roy, I can't remember, was about attaching your self-worth to your business. Correct. About making your business, or what you were running / what you were doing to serve people, as part of your entire personal being. And if your business fails for whatever reason, or is starting to fail, therefore you are as a failure as a person. There's a lot of people that I've come across with that mentality, and they've had to crash land essentially, and be able to understand and be able to build themselves up, possibly with a new business, or maybe in a new career entirely. But understanding that business, as well as the hustle culture I mentioned before, is not necessarily you as a human being or as an individual. It's something that you do to serve others. You are there to help others, but it doesn't come at a cost of yourself. Yeah.
Is there one?
It's taken a lot of people to actually realize
one standout complication that these colleagues of yours? Is there one particular thing that has caused their plans not to work out, or is it just different circumstances at different times of their life? External, like personal issues, or just they've chosen a business that really doesn't have a place in the market. I'm always fascinated, with it's an old article I wrote that I read years ago. I think it was 2015, and the top 10 jobs in 2015 weren't even invented in 2005. So it really is Pandora's box in terms of what you can open up and have a crack at. But coming back to your initial statement, Bernard, if you can't get a sale, which will lead you to more sales, you've just got to say, really, is this something that I can keep going at?
Yes, I had a client once, and he was a excuse me, a fishmonger, I suppose. You buy fish from the, excuse me, I'll just have to have a drink.
Must be something in the air, Bernard.
So he'd buy fish at the fish market every morning and then sell it out in his own shops and also to his clients. But of course, when they were unable to pay him, he wasn't able to have enough cash flow to keep buying fish to support his business. And really it evaporated. The reason is because he wasn't strong enough to say, you have to pay me, otherwise we're not going to give you any more fish. Yeah. So it was his personality, I think, and I couldn't really help it because he wasn't strong enough to collect the money.
And I put that in the big bucket called decision making. And part of your conversation too, Bernard, is understanding consequences of making that decision. You know, my big client that I work with out in Grovedale, it's been really interesting, and they've come around really quickly. They weren't what I would call active enough in collecting money, and now that's changed this year in particular because we started to do some analysis of people just blatantly ignoring their credit terms, whereas probably 80% of the business, fantastic, they pay on time, no questions asked. But there's always that habitual offenders that say if you don't ask, you're not going to get paid. But if you've got a business where you're letting your credit get out of control when people aren't paying you, you're really putting yourself in a very dangerous position for the viability of the business.
Yeah.
And in relation to that, Roy, you were mentioning before about other people who, if there was one reason why younger entrepreneurs were having their businesses crash land or letting go of their businesses entirely, I think at the moment there's, or at least not strictly at the moment, but a lot of people that I communicate with are now holding their mental health at a higher standard than I believe other people would have in the past. Not necessarily saying that, say, for example, when you two were working heavily in, say, Roy, in the, when you're working in the warehouse or when you're working at the bank, Bernard.
Absolutely.
But like there was a lot of I was under from what I've seen, again from history, I'm under the impression that mental health wasn't really thought of as either an issue or something that could stop you, or it's just something that you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep going. Where nowadays,
sorry, Zoe, you go. I'll add to that when you finish. Yeah,
exactly. And the mentality nowadays is that a business is supposed to support you, is supposed to bring you income, is supposed to help support you, your business, your family, your livelihood, not the other way around. And if you find yourself and your mental health being mental, physical, and emotional health being impacted by something that's supposed to be serving you, then after a while, and as Bernard has alluded to, if it's no longer getting to that point where it's actually making profit or even hindering you, causing you to get bankrupt or any of those not annoying, but very dreadful things that happen to someone, for that to be able to be let go because it's not part of who you are, is something that's definitely been a big turnaround I've even seen in the past 5 years.
I think the big change around COVID, particularly, my niece and nephew that I stay in touch with, they are 30 and 31, and they started COVID at 29 and 31, and just listening to the challenges they were going through was incredibly difficult. But just going back to a history thing, Zoe, you're absolutely spot on, because a business that I was part of mid-90s, went for the interview, the operations manager and the CEO eventually turned up for a cursory discussion, and he said, "Yeah, look, you do realise you're going to have a challenge out there because you've got a bunch of cretins out there in the warehouse." And for the leader of the organisation to have that opinion really just sent the message. And when I got in and started working with them and educating them, improve their decision making and their self-esteem, it just changed overnight. So and if that's the focus of the mid-20 something, that 25 to 30, treasuring how good they feel, that is an excellent outcome, because if you haven't got good vibe or good positive energy around yourself, really hard to be focused and energized about building a business.
Exactly. We're about to finish up, Bernard, but is there one final thing or one final piece of advice you would like to give, say, a young entrepreneur who may be watching us today?
Well, I'll just keep going until find that updraft or that escalator that's going up to the next level, and stand on that, and that will solve a lot of the problems. But I'm an optimist.
But I'm an optimist.
And I'll just add further to Bernard that's a terrific focus about being energized, but get a mentor, have some idea crunching ability, because you can't make 100% of decisions correct all the time. And even though Bernard and I, as being elder statesmen of the business and working environment, there's still stuff we're learning. But particularly at a younger age, is having that enthusiasm, the energy, and the positivity. And it's a wonderful visual image to say, get the updraft or get on the escalator, because that everyone immediately knows you're going up. And if you've got that positivity around you, you've got a really good opportunity to be successful.
Thank you so much for your wisdom and your advice and the information that you guys have given us today. I've certainly learned a lot from both of you, as I'm sure that our viewers will continue to get on as much as they continue watching us in the future. One thing I do want to
say, I'm quite happy to answer questions later on. My email is bernardkellygeelong@gmail.com.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, in that case, I'll put that in the description of the YouTube video. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check it out in the description below. And if you're watching it on another platform, I will make sure to put the email there. And why not, while you're in the description, check out the freebie that Bernard is providing as well, in the first link of the description.
I'd like to quickly acknowledge too, thank you, Bernard, for your contribution. It's been a wonderful conversation, and the information here that you provide from historical point of view and your 17 rules for success is a really good. Keep that in your hip pocket and pull that out when you need some motivation. So I appreciate you taking the time and the effort to put your presentation material together.
Well, let's do it all again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely, Bernard. Been very enjoyable. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Zoe, for the time and effort in managing the flow for us today.
That's all good. You two did a beautiful job, I must say. So what we're going to do now is we're going to finish up. I'm going to play the ending tune, and I'm going to ask that you two stay on afterwards so we can have a chat.
Yep, cool.
Good. I like
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Hope you have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.